With a little more than 5 weeks to go until the start of the 2025-2026 NHL season, we have some questions. On today's edition of Locked On NHL, the 10 biggest storylines ahead of the 2025-2026 season.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. I am Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. That is my good friend and one of the co-hosts of Locked On Penguins, Hunter Hodies. And we want to thank everyone that has taken the time to make Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Locked On NHL is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we've got your teams covered every day. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. And you guys know already, but football season is right around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. So, Hunter, my friend, we're about 5 weeks away. The NHL season faces off. October 3rd is the first night of games. Triple header of games, still about a month to go. There are plenty of storylines to dive into. We're getting closer. You know, you had some hot USA and Team Canada orientation events, which were effectively sitting in a room and looking at slideshows and talking to each other, not actual hockey stuff, but we're inching closer to actual hockey. And as part of framing how I like to think about things, something I do before a season starts, regardless of sport. I did this for the NFL. I did this for college. I like to ask myself a bunch of questions. What am I curious about? What do I want to figure out? And that's kind of the impetus for today's show, the 10 biggest storylines ahead of this upcoming season. And Hunter, I will kick things off. And I don't think there's a bigger storyline in hockey right now than the fact that Connor McDavid doesn't have a contract after this upcoming season. This isn't something that happens all that often. You know, Sidney Crosby got that stuff squared away relatively early when the best player in the world had been an unrestricted free agent. Austin Matthews went into the later stages of the summer before the deal he's on presently. Of course, Mitch Marner this past summer went all the way through, got to UFA, but Marner not on the caliber of player of McDavid. And it's very simple. I said this on Locked On Oilers for the Thursday episode. This isn't a negotiation. Connor McDavid has a position, and the Oilers meet it. There isn't a back and forth. There isn't a, can you do this? Can you do that? It's, I would like to sign for this many years and this many dollars per year. When you're ready to give it to me, let's sign the contract. That's what this comes down to for me.
They will give him whatever he wants. They're not going to nickel and dime him, considering that he's the best player in the world. I think that's another good way to really piss him off. And by the way, Nick, you said October 3rd. I believe the first day of the season was October 7th, because that's when the Penguins play the Rangers. So again, just had to put that out there for full transparency for everyone. But you're right. I don't think this is going to be much of a negotiation. If he wants a 4-year deal, the Oilers will be like, okay, we will give you this AAV. Does this work? And if he says no, okay, what about this one? And if he says yes, okay, then there's the contract. If it's an 8-year term or maybe 6-7 years, and they say, okay, do you like this AAV? No. Okay, well, we'll give you this. No. Okay, we'll give you that. Again, it's going to be what McDavid wants at the end of the day. And I think he's taking this even more serious right now, Nate, because he wants to win. That's the biggest thing. He's come so close these last couple of years. 2 Game 7 losses. Well, no, 1 Game 7 loss, in the Stanley Cup final. Game 6 loss the following year. You are within 1 to 2 games of winning a trophy, and you don't get there. And he just wants to make sure, are the Oilers all in throughout the rest of my tenure to win a Stanley Cup? And if he gets the answer is yes, then he will sign there. My opinion, I think he's going to sign there. He's not going to get to unrestricted free agency, but you know, you're going to see a lot of people, you know, farm the clicks for all that and stuff, but he's going to sign there at some point.
My friend, what's your first one?
My first one for you, Nick, and this is also a very big storyline. Very simple. Can the Florida Panthers make history, Nick, and can they three-peat this upcoming season?
So the basic math would say yes. I think the fact the East is so much worse than the West, and their path, arguably the hardest playoff series the Panthers will play, is their first round series, whether that would be against Toronto or Tampa Bay. I would venture to say those might be the second and third best teams in the East. I know a lot of people feel this version of Carolina, you know, Nick Ehlers, Keandre Miller, might be a little bit different. Logan Stankoven, another year in his development. But for me, I feel Florida is far and away the best team in the East. And if you just get to the final, you're already you've done most of the hard work, and you think about the path anybody coming out of the West is going to go through, whether that's in the Pacific or the Central. It's going to be a whole lot more difficult to get out of the West. And look, the Oilers got through the West pretty easily last year, and it didn't really matter all that much when it came down to it in the Stanley Cup final. I think this team has as good a chance. Tampa Bay got to the final the third year in a row. They ultimately lost to Colorado. They ran out of gas, and Colorado was just a little bit better, and that was enough to make the difference. But I definitely think Florida's capable. I wouldn't pick against them coming out of the East at the very least.
As long as they stay healthy, I think they have a really good shot. Matthew Tkachuk is going to be back right around January. It sounds like right before the 2026 Olympics in Milan. So as long as he's healthy for the second half of the season and all of their core pieces are as well, they have a great shot. You're going to get from Sergei Bobrovsky in net. I'd like to think the Panthers will try to make an upgrade or two at the trade deadline. They're always poking around the trade market around that time. They're never satisfied, I guess. So I definitely think they have a pretty good shot at this, considering when you look at the landscape of the East. When that team is healthy, I just don't know who is beating them in a 7-game series unless they are too tired. But Nick, what's your second one?
This is one for me. In Hollywood, when an actor does a movie that's kind of crappy, but they get paid a lot, they call it one for me. I'm really kind of invested in the Columbus Blue Jackets now. I really want to see if they can make the leap and get back to the postseason. Last year, they were one of the great stories in the league. First year under Dean Evison, you saw Kirill Marchenko really kind of come out of his shell, play well. A full year of healthy Adam Fantilli really looked promising. Zach Werenski played the best hockey of his career. And for me, it really comes down to whether or not they can get replacement level goaltending. I think Columbus forward talent wise, and even on the back end, I know the Provorov contract is bad, but for as of right now, he's still a decent NHL player, and they have enough talent where if the Rangers don't really bounce back, if the Islanders are what they are, the Penguins, the path to the Blue Jackets, finishing third or fourth in the Metro, it's very doable for them. They were only 8-9 points back of a playoff spot last year. And this team's, and when you're talking about a young team that's on an upward trajectory, another year into the future is a good thing for them, because those guys like Fantilli need the work. They need the game reps. And I am very excited to see if they can get over that hump and get back to the postseason for the first time since the bubble.
Like the Flyers the season prior, just felt like the Blue Jackets ran out of gas at the wrong time. At the end of the season, they were playing their tails off every single night. And then once we got to, Nick, right around that, feels like that mid-March time, just they ran out of gas, and then they spiraled a little bit and they just couldn't get back fully into the race, once we got into mid-April and all that. I like this Blue Jackets team. I like a lot of their young talent. I'm really excited for another year of Cole Sillinger, also for Voronkov. I hope Sean Monahan is also fully healthy this year, because he was great when healthy for the Jackets last year. You mentioned Zach Werenski. Fantilli is going to be really good again this year. Kent Johnson, really curious about him as well. But my thing is, Nick, it felt like the Jackets had a golden opportunity to make a really big move this offseason.
They had a ton of cap space, yeah.
And they didn't. And I just feel like that's a mistake. I feel like you needed to give this group another big boost by acquiring a good player, whether that's someone added to your defense or your forward group. The goaltending, very big question, but I just feel like they kind of missed an opportunity to add a big piece, which is why right now I'm like, I feel like they're on the outside looking in, but if still a lot of things go right, I could definitely see them getting in as a wild card team.
I think that's well within the range of possibility. I think when you're Columbus, you run into the issue we always talk about. Can you convince people to sign there? And that's why generally you have to be a little more active in the trade market when it comes to acquiring guys. That would have been an interesting landing spot for someone like Marco Rossi, skill, upside. Ultimately, Rossi signed an extension to stay in Minnesota, but that's the type of move you need to make, or maybe something along the lines of what Toronto did for Matthias McKelly. That's the kind of move you need to make if you're Columbus, to give your guys a little bit more of a vote of confidence, shot in the arm to say, we appreciate what you did last year. Here's some more help. We're going to keep getting better. We are going to take our first break on today's edition of Locked On NHL. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what happens when you miss your window of contention. Be right back. The NFL season is a few weeks away, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't miss offer. Right now, new FanDuel customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use on the FanDuel app. I love using FanDuel because it makes it so easy to get in on the fun, whether it's before kickoff with live betting, or if you want to cook up a same game parlay with your friends, it makes it all the more exciting. FanDuel is the quickest, easiest, and best way to add a little bit more juice to your football Sunday. So FanDuel has one question. Are you ready? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. One more time, that's FanDuel.com, or visit the FanDuel app to place that first $5 bet for $300 in bonus bets. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL, and we have an important request for you. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about you, our listeners, and make your favorite podcasts even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertisers. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can find the link in the show notes. Thanks so much for helping Locked On out. Hunter, my friend, it is your turn.
So this next one, it kind of goes in line with the Blue Jackets. I was going to ask this one a little bit later, but now that you asked the one about the Blue Jackets, I felt like this was the right time. Nick, how much progress can the Anaheim Ducks make this season? Like, are they ready for the playoffs like they seem to think that they are? Pat Verbeek has said, we want to make the playoffs this year. We hired Joel Quenneville. We are ready to take that next step. Me, I'm a bit more skeptical. I need to see it first. I like a lot of their young pieces. They still got to sign Mason McTavish. It feels like you got grinders on both sides here, really try to get what they want. I assume this is going to get done probably closer to training camp. You don't want a player missing camp and all that. But I like a lot of the young pieces here. I like Lucas Dostal and net. But my friend, I don't think they can make the playoffs this year. I think progress for sure. I don't see them as a playoff team yet, though. What do you say? Do you think they are ready for the playoffs like they seem to think that they are?
So if you want to make the case for them, it's really straightforward. The bottom half of the West is abominable. You have chances to beat up on Seattle, Chicago, San Jose. You have the opportunities to beat up on the mediocre teams like Nashville. You have the capacity to hang around. And the Ducks finished 16 points out of the last playoff spot in the West last year. They finished with 80. The Blues finished last year with 96. We're talking about 8 more wins in an 82-game season. You have an above-average goalie. You have a ton of really interesting young pieces. I'm very excited to see if Leo Carlson, if Bennett Sinecki, if those young guys can really kind of, I don't want to say sink or swim because they're so early in their respective careers, but start making progress, start getting better. I think the Ducks have really leaned on veteran guys to kind of fill in the gaps, pieces like Alex Kallorn, Ryan Strome, Jacob Trouba, Frank Vetrano, the trade for Chris Kreider. Those are all solid pros who help. But ultimately, for the Ducks to get where they want to go, and we're talking about the playoffs, just qualifying for the playoffs, they need their young guys to take leaps. And we know the way prospect development works. Not all these guys are going to hit. And if some of them hit, some are going to hit more than others. And it's incumbent upon the Ducks to put those guys in a position to succeed. I think the Ducks can get closer, but I would be pretty surprised if they qualified for the postseason, barring something unforeseen. You know, if the Kings like fall off a cliff, I suppose there's another playoff spot up for grabs. If Vancouver, Calgary kind of stay stuck in the middle, ditto the Blues, I could see an argument maybe they sneak their way in. But barring something crazy, you know, if Dostal has like a Vezina caliber goalie season, okay, then I could see them making it. But beyond that, I really struggle to see a path for them just based on what's around them. You know, Colorado, Dallas, Winnipeg all seem pretty safe bets. Minnesota seems a decent bet for the postseason. Then you go to the Pacific, the Oilers, the Golden Knights. All right, we're already at 7, and there's one playoff spot up for the other 8 teams. And yeah, you can eliminate some of the bad ones, but the math becomes really
St. Louis is also in there. We all know that Utah, Nick, they want to make the playoffs next year. There's a lot of spots. Vancouver, we talked about, they want to make the playoffs. Calgary was really close last year. It's just going to be, I think, a little too tough, but I do think they can make progress.
Yes. And that's what they need. You know, they've been adrift for a while now. They haven't been to the playoffs since the pandemic. They didn't even qualify for the expanded playoff during the bubble. They got a lot. They have gone through quite a few cycles now of just not making any progress and continually spinning their tires out. And at a certain point, you don't get to keep doing that if you're Pat Verbeek. And then we pivot to something I mentioned Vancouver. I would put the Rangers in this boat as well. I'm going to put the Bruins in this boat as well. What do you do when it's over? You know, you're at the party and the music's over and the host is waiting for you to go out to your car and leave. And that's where all three of these teams are. You know, the Bruins put together one of the great regular seasons in the history of the NHL a couple of years ago. They lost in the first round. The Rangers put together their best season in the history of their 99 years to that point in history. They have nothing to show for it. The Canucks, they had the one nice playoff appearance. They lost to the Oilers in 7 in pretty heartbreaking fashion. All three of those teams, I would say, have missed their best chance. I think the Bruins are firmly in the downward trajectory, and it's whether or not they're going to go the Penguins route of just tearing it entirely down around their big guys, or if they try and go the Capitals route and bringing guys in around their keys. I think Vancouver absolutely missed the boat. I think losing JT Miller and Bo Horvat in a 2-year window, you just don't overcome that level of talent drop off. And like, I like some of the young pieces Vancouver has, but at the same time, you know, Evander Kane's 33 years old and you're going to ask him to be a top 6 forward on this team beyond Quinn Hughes. What does that defense look like? Will Thatcher Demko ever stay healthy enough? And then for the Rangers, I mean, they'll get back to the playoffs, sure, but nobody's picking them against Florida. I don't think I would pick them against Tampa Bay, maybe even Toronto. Sure, they can beat Carolina, but they always beat Carolina. That's not really remarkable.
Would you pick them against a healthy Devils team, Nick?
No, the Devils play a style that gives the Rangers such a hard time. They are so much faster, especially when it comes to transition. And look, I don't even think the Devils are all of that good. I just think the Rangers really struggle against certain types of teams. And when you have foot speed the way the Devils do and the way the Panthers do, you really give the Rangers a hard time. So it's really simple. Can you put the toothpaste back in the tube? Can you get the Rangers to buy back in if you're Mike Sullivan? Because last year, you saw what happens when everybody checks out. You go 5-15 and you miss the play 5-15 from December through the end of January and you miss the playoffs. You saw what happened last year in Vancouver when everybody started tuning out Rick Tocchet. And then you think about what happened in Boston last year where they made Jim Montgomery the sacrificial lamb for last year. Like it was his fault. The roster sucked.
And then, Nick, after the trade deadline, when Marchand got traded, they just gave up. Like they were like, "Yep, we're done. Like our captain just got traded. There's just no reason to on that." Obviously, they're going to keep playing because they're competitors and they're going to try to win every game. But it felt like when you were watching a lot of their games, they were done. Like they knew that their season was basically over. Again, the biggest thing with the Bruins I come back to, Nick, who is scoring the goals outside of David Pastrnak?
Seriously, you and me, brother.
Fair question. Like, I don't know who is scoring a lot of these goals outside of Pasta. He'll give them 50, 55 next season if he's fully healthy. He can even push for 60. He is that good. I just still don't know who is scoring a lot of the goals outside of him. He's the best, one of the best pure goal scorers in the league. Jeremy Swayman, if he has a bounce back year with Pastrnak scoring 50, 55, okay, that's good. But still, what does that mean for the rest of the team? I think McAvoy could be really good. Of course, once again, he's one of the best defensemen in the league. But even if you add him in there, what about the rest of the team? I feel like the Bruins right now, they might need to start slowly tearing this down a little bit while building around.
They don't even have anything to tear down, though, which is the hard part. I mean, Marchand was their best piece, and they got a second-round pick, a conditional second-round pick. Yeah. That's all they got. I mean, if you want to trade McAvoy, Swayman, or Pasta and really start over, you could do that, but that's the hardest thing to do in hockey is to get the star player. So I don't think
they're going to do that. Like, they're not going to move any of those guys. I think they're going to try to maybe move out some of the other supporting pieces around them to maybe try and start over around those main three players just because they're signed long-term. And of course, they're your best players. Vancouver, I got to see it to believe it this year. Pettersson needs to be so much better. Maybe that's true under a new coach, but he's got to be better. Thatcher Demko, he's got to stay healthy. The Quinn Hughes question about whether he's going to leave is going to hang in their heads. I need to see Vancouver get a little bit deeper up front if I'm really going to buy into them as a full-on contender. Could they sneak into the playoffs? Sure, but I don't think they would do a lot of damage even if they got in. That team a couple years ago, I think that was, you're right, like that was their best shot to go really far. And they had the Oilers on the ropes that entire series until they lost it in 7 games. And then as for the Rangers, I think Mike Sullivan can get them back to the playoffs. I think he's one of the best coaches in the league. I saw that here for a decade in Pittsburgh. But who's playing third line center for the Rangers this year, especially if they
might be me. I'm going to be honest with you. It might be me.
Like it sounds like they want to have Mika Zibanejad play wing this year. Sure. Who's your third line center? Adam Fox. I think he's going to be good under him. He's going to have a really good partner in Gavrikov. You know what you're going to get from Shesterkin. I'm still really concerned about the rest of that defensive group. I don't see a lot of really good, talented players on the second and third pairing. And then the bottom six, Nick, I think also needs a little bit of work for the Rangers. So I think they can get in as a wild card team, but I don't see them beating the Devils, the Panthers, maybe even the Lightning. I won't go as far as the Maple Leafs. I think we'd have to see that would actually kind of be a funny series, Toronto versus New York, especially without Mitch Marner.
A fraud off. I'd be tapped in for a fraud off. All right, we got to take our second and final break. When we come back, got a couple more storylines to hit on. Be right back. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's where our friends at Monarch Money come in as a personal all-in-one finance tool that brings your entire financial picture together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does all of the heavy lifting. You can link your accounts in minutes, see clear data visualizations, get smart categorizations of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever opening a spreadsheet. Monarch definitely helped me be a little bit more prudent in my planning, whether that's vacation or my long-term savings. So do not let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year subscription. One more time, that's 50% off your first year subscription at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out with Hunter and I on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL as we make through our biggest curiosities entering the season, the storylines that matter most to us. Hunter, my friend, it's to you.
Well, we got to keep going in rapid fire here just because we're running a little bit out of time. But Nick, can the Tampa Bay Lightning recapture some magic, or is their window shut? 3 straight first-round exits since losing in the Stanley Cup final. They got absolutely bullied by the Florida Panthers. I know the Lightning are going all in for as long as they have Nikita Kucherov. They signed Jake Gensel. You still have Braden Point. Hagel is there. Victor Hedman, Andre Vasilevsky. We can keep going down the list. Like, this team is very good, bona fide playoff team. But do you think they can recapture some magic, or is this maybe the beginning of the end for their window?
I think if you're Tampa Bay, you basically have to win the division and avoid Florida in the first round. I really think that's your key. I could see if Tampa Bay gets the first spot in the Atlantic and they play one of the 2 wild cards and then they play the winner of the other Atlantic series, I could see a world where they could get to the second or third round, depending on how things shake out. You know, if the Panthers don't really push that hard in the regular season because they understand they just got to make the playoffs and they'll be able to get it dialed in. But I think, to your point, you know, it's hard to recapture that magic. And it's not like they're bad. You know, the Lightning on paper are really good up front. Their top 6 is great. What they've done with Brandon Hagel, what they identified there, what he is now, that Hagel-Sorelli tandem that we see featured very prominently in the bottom 6 of Team Canada. You still have Hedman, who's playing at a high level. Ryan McDonough, who was great for them last year, in a little bit more of a second pair role. They have enough talent where they're going to be probably the second, third, fourth best team in the East. It's just we all live in the Florida Panthers shadow right now, and it makes it hard to be optimistic to pick anyone against them.
Right. I think they got to play a wild card team, or even if you're, for example, Nick, if the Panthers get the top seed in the Atlantic and the Lightning get the second seed, they need to beat that first round opponent, whoever it is. Maybe it's Toronto or something like that. And I think I would take Tampa Bay over Toronto in a first round series. And then they might honestly need to rely on someone to beat the Panthers in the first round. And it's probably unlikely going into the season still, considering how great the Panthers still are, because like we've seen, I just don't know if the Lightning have what it takes to beat the Panthers right now. For a while, it was big brother, little brother. Now it's kind of swung where both of them again are at the same height. Well, the Panthers might be a little bit taller now. So you're right. They have to avoid them in the first round. Maybe in the second round if the Panthers, are gassed, but still, right now I would take the Panthers to win that series. So I think they might have to rely on someone to upset them, especially if the Panthers win the Atlantic and then the Lightning are at number 2. Nick, I give it to you.
How bad does the Gavin McKenna tank off get? And I asked that question in the framing of how much selling off are we going to see? Are the Penguins going to trade off Brian Rust, Rickard Rakell, and Erik Karlsson over the course of the season to make sure they have good odds on winning McKenna? Will we see the Kraken sell off a lot of their expensive veterans to try and stink? Will we see the Bruins get rid of anything discernible in terms of talent? There are a good 5 teams. Chicago very much still in this mix. I would venture to say the Sharks are still in this mix where things shake out right. How bad does it get? Because you remember that season, the McDavid year, where the Sabres and the Leafs gave away their teams. They were going out there with AHL rosters effectively for the full year for a chance at McDavid. Are we going to see that level of stinking this year?
I think for some teams, yes. Still maybe Chicago, even though they're going to try to be better this year. San Jose, they're going to try to be better this year, but I still think you could see some sell-offs there. Pittsburgh, I don't think all of Rust, Rakell, and Karlsson are going to be gone by the deadline, but I think at least one, if not 2 of them, will be gone by the deadline. Also, Nick, people have to remember, Sidney Crosby is still on this team. He's not just going to willingly tank games. So I have a hard time seeing them finish bottom 5 right now, but if all of them get traded after the deadline, that is a distinct possibility. I kind of have them in the bottom 6 to 10 right now. Also, Nick, what about Nashville? If they are really bad again, you can maybe see a pretty big sell-off there from Barry Trotz. So throw them in there too, my friend.
Does anybody want 34-year-old Steven Stamkos, though? That's the problem. It's the same thing with the Bruins. The Bruins could want to give away Victor Arvidsson. Yeah. Is anyone going to take him?
Yeah, that's the question. So you have
Ryan O'Reilly. Sure, I'll give you that. If you wanted to trade Ryan O'Reilly, if you wanted to trade Marchessault, I think you could do something with 1 or 2 of those.
The Flyers maybe they want to be better this year, but again, they have some tradable assets. I don't think they're going to trade Sean Couturier or anything like that, but they still have some guys that teams would want at the deadline. If the Islanders are really bad this year, for example, which this is not their goal, of course, do they sell off? I think they have a better chance of selling off this year under Matthew Darche than they do under Lou Lamoriello, because he'd always be about the playoffs. But Matthew Darche, he kind of sees the big picture with that team. But again, TBD on how
they could do something interesting. The Islanders.
I'm curious.
The expiring guys they have, like Palmieri, Anders Lee. You have the Sorokin chip if you really just want to blow it entirely up. You have Barzal and Horvat, who are nice pieces, but probably more 2s on good teams. So the Islanders could really speed this process up of getting where they want to be, and they could give themselves a good chance at getting Gavin McKenna as well. So that's a good consideration.
Right. I agree. Well, next up, I got 2 more, Nick. What is the expectation for Mitch Marner in Vegas this year? 100+ points. Last year with the Toronto Maple Leafs, 27 goals, 102 points, 81 games. His 102 points set a career high. After 2 of the previous 3 years, he was right at 100 points, just about 97 and 99. The year before, he was at 85. Nick, what do you think are realistic expectations for Marner? Can he hit the 100-point mark this year? Honestly, I think he has a pretty good shot. Playing with Jack Eichel, playing with Mark Stone, he's going to get top power play minutes. He's going to play a whole bunch in his own zone, considering how good defensively he is. I think he has a really good shot at hitting 100 points this year.
So what I would say to that, and that's not a bad shout, but if you go and look historically at the Golden Knights, especially under Bruce Cassidy, guys don't put up crazy counting stat seasons. Like last year, I think Eichel hit 90 for, I want to say, the first or second time in his career. But the next closest point total guy after that is 67. If one big dog eats and gets that much of the offense, what does that do to the other guys? I'm not as interested in, say, just the straight up counting stats as I am the fit. Does it work? Do him and Eichel together do something different than what we saw from, say, maybe with Matthews or with Nylander or with Tavares? That's what it comes down to for me, because ultimately, and we all know this, he's going to be judged as if he were a starting quarterback in football. Does Vegas win or no? That is what Mitch Marner is going to be judged on. If Vegas gets to a conference final and Mitch Marner plays really well, even if he only has 75, 80 points, people will say they had a good season and Toronto was dumb for letting him go. If he puts up 100 points and they go out in the first round again, people will skewer him for not being a playoff performer. So it's tricky. I don't think there's a great answer, but for me, I think the fit more than the actual stats themselves, just because Vegas doesn't score a whole lot. Their offense is very even evenly distributed.
Yeah, Cassidy's a really good defensive coach
Exactly.
as well. Like you saw that during his time in Boston before he was let go. You saw when the Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup. They are very stingy to play again. So I just figured I would put it out there because we've all known how great Marner is offensively throughout his career, but I do think people still sleep on his defensive efforts as well. They were very good in Toronto.
Marner's going to end up in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Every single time I say that in a video, I get derisive comments. He's going to hit 1,100, 1,200 points. He's going to get a gold medal or two with Canada. He's a fringe Selke guy as a winger. All of the counting stats will be there. It's simply
if he gets a cup, I think it's probably game over.
Oh, I think even if he just gets a gold medal, I think he probably gets in more likely than not. You know, Carey Price got in with just 2 gold medals and no team stats. Of course, he had the Hart and Vezina season, but you get what I'm saying here. Marner's put together a really nice resume. The last one for me, what's a full season of Mikko Rantanen look like in Dallas? Because if you'll recall, it wasn't the easiest fit when he first got to Dallas. It took him a while to get going. He was incredible in the playoffs in the first round in particular, swung game 7 against Colorado, which was a great moment. But what's the fit look like? Because that Dallas team, it's now or never, man. You are going to start needing to pony up big cost increases for guys like Thomas Harley, Miro Heiskanen going forward. And this is about as good a look as it's going to get. Can he be a 90-point forward? What does that do to the other guys? You know, we just talked about that in regards to Mitch Marner. Well, if Mikko Rantanen becomes a 90, 100-point guy on the Stars, was that due to Robertson? Was that due to Hintz? How does that impact the counting stats on the team and frankly, the pecking order on the team? You know, there were games there where Pete DeBoer was effectively running 11 forwards because he wanted to play Rantanen more. So there's a lot to consider, but I still, and we've been doing this for 3 years now, Hunter, you and I really like this Stars team, man. It's really good on paper.
It's always very good until they go up against, it feels like, the Oilers in the playoffs. I will say, Nick, I think you were thinking of Shea Weber, by the way. Carey Price is not in the Hall of Fame yet, but Shea Weber,
he will be. Yeah.
He will be eventually. Shea Weber just got in, so
of,
that's probably what you were confusing about.
Yes.
He doesn't have the Stanley Cups, but he has the international success.
Yeah.
Just want to put that out there for everyone because, of course, we are transparent on the show. I think with Rantanen, it was a bit of a slow start, but you saw him find his footing. You know, once he got more into his tenure, especially, you know, he had that dog in him against Colorado, game 7. Basically, the biggest, we can't curse, the biggest FU game I've seen in quite some time. You traded me, screw you. That's what you get. And he just had that dog in him. And I think with Rantanen, you're going to see him put up well over a point per game. I think he can get to 90 to 100 points with the Stars team. Great goal scorer, awesome playmaker. I'm really curious, though, to see if they can finally get over this hump. They're out of salary cap hell. I think Rantanen can help them do it, but it's just, can they get the right matchups in the playoffs? First 2 last year were tough. You go through Colorado and Winnipeg, you get through the Central, but they had the wrong matchup once again against an Oilers team that was steamrolling everyone in the playoffs. I think if they had a different matchup, I think they could have gotten to a final. You know, time is running out for a player like Jamie Benn. He's at the end of his career. He's come really close a lot of times. But now that they have Rantanen for the long haul, I think there's a decent chance they can break through. But can they get the right matchup? Like, for example, I don't even know if Vegas is the right matchup for them in the 3rd round if they get
that first round series 2 years ago was a rock fight. Every game was 2-1
to the highest degree. Anyone like you went in that game 7, you could have convinced me for either team to win. It was that close of a series.
And that was a Vegas team that was really injured. You know, a lot of guys didn't play down the backstretch of the regular season and were basically coming off the couch to play in a best-of-7 series, and they played lockdown defense.
Yeah, exactly. And all those games, like some of them at least, they were so low scoring, but it was between 2 teams that were also really disciplined in their own zone, especially the Golden Knights, where the Stars were able to win out. So that's a good one, Nick. My last one, though, is this the year the Carolina Hurricanes finally break through in the Eastern Conference? They've made a lot of moves this offseason, and I mean a lot of moves. You get Nick Ehlers. You get Keandre Miller, You have your young core locked in place. You still have Jacob Slavin. Is this the year they finally break through, or do they need another star? I kind of lean towards that one.
We need a button that just says Florida Panthers every time I press it, because unfortunately, until someone beats the Panthers, like Ric Flair said, to be the man, you got to beat the man. And the Panthers are the man. Until somebody beats them, I'm not going to pick against them. This is very much late stage Brady Belichick stuff.
Yeah.
From 2015 on, I wasn't picking anybody against the Patriots. Come on. They've won 2 in a row. They've gone to 3 in a row. They've pretty much steamrolled everybody they've played along the way, other than the Oilers in the Cup final the first time. I am very reticent to pick against them, though I do think Carolina is better. I will give you that carve out. I will say they are better on paper than they were last year. You see what a full year of Logan Stankoven does. You see what Keandre Miller can be. Maybe he's your Jacob Slavin heir apparent, and you keep this window going. Aho is a top probably 20, 25 player in the game at this point. They have a lot of talent. Maybe they finally hand the reins over to Kochetkov as the full-time starter from Freddie Anderson, and maybe that makes a difference for them in the postseason, because that's been their undoing more than once, the performance of Freddie Anderson. But until someone beats the Panthers, man, I'm probably not picking against them.
That's fair. I mean, I think Carolina has the ability to get through the Metro.
Yeah, for sure.
I think they are at worst the second best team in the division. If I had to say right now, and we're a little over a month away from the start of the season, I would actually pick them to win the Metro right now. I'd have New Jersey number 2.
Me too.
But they're at least the second best team. If you want to argue New Jersey is better, that's fine. I would go Carolina, New Jersey top 2. I kind of have to think about the rest of the division, just because that's just how the Metro is now. It's just not that good. I think they can definitely get through the first 2 rounds. It's just, can they get through the winner of the Atlantic? And that's probably going to be the Panthers. I think they have another move to make by the deadline. I still think they need that next really big star on their team. I just don't know how they're going to go about getting it. And Rod Brindamore has talked about that before. Like, he's talked about, I would like to go get a star that fits my system. But I also think, Rod, you need to kind of tweak your system a little bit to have that said star play well for you. It didn't work with Mikko Rantanen, didn't work with Jake Gensel because you didn't bring him back. How is this going to work the next time you try this?
And that will do it for this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. Be sure to check out the Locked On survey. Get a chance at one of those Amazon gift cards. Hunter and I will talk to you guys next Thursday.